Hello everyone, it's Jose again. In this video, I'm going to talk about the distinction between primary sources and secondary sources. A primary source is an immediate first-hand account of an experience, of an event, of a topic. And it's usually used by researchers and writers as objects to analyze and dissect. And what you want to do when you're using a primary source is you want to analyze how the author, a given author, and a given audience at a given time understood a topic by the way that artifact, maybe it could have been a story, maybe it could have been a video, presented that issue. So you're focusing on the biases, the assumptions, the viewpoints, the way the topic is framed, the type of language that is used to frame that conversation as a way of analyzing how an author at a given time and a given audience at a given time understood a topic and set sort of the way people talked about that issue. So primary sources can take on a variety of formats. Sometimes they're original documents, sometimes they're photos, sometimes they're images, oftentimes they're newspaper reports, and it just depends on what you're looking for. Also, it could be fiction, like novels, movies, or television shows, or plays, or music. But keep this in mind. They're just a source that has a direct connection with a specific topic, and it's used as an object of analysis. So you as a researcher and as a writer are looking at this source and analyzing how it's framing a conversation about a topic, either in the past or currently if you're focusing on a current topic. Now, that's different from a secondary source. A secondary source is completely different from a primary source in the sense that a secondary source provides an extra layer of interpretation and analysis that interprets all of the biases, the assumptions, the viewpoints, the framing of a topic at a given time. So it's kind of a step removed from a primary source. A primary source is something that's an object that you're going to analyze and explore in terms of how it presents an issue. A secondary source gives you added information and interpretation in terms of how an issue is being explored in a context. So the most common types of secondary sources are peer-reviewed scholarly academic articles about a topic. And to give you an example that relates to Essay 2, if you're in my English 3 class, here's a source that I found online on EBSCOhost. And it's the Cultural Production of Mexican Identity in the United States, an examination of Mexican threat narrative. So in this source, the authors are analyzing the Los Angeles Times. So the Los Angeles Times news articles are the primary source. Those are the objects of analysis. The writers of this source right here are analyzing how the New York Times reported on Mexican immigrants between 2008 and 2009. So they're using articles from that time period to analyze how reporters at that time were framing issues that then influence the American public to view Mexican immigrants. So can you see the distinction there between those two things? Good. So going back for what I want you to do for homework. Before I get there, I do want to talk about determining when a primary source is a primary source and when it's a secondary source, because that can be a little bit vague. That line can be blurry. But if you're analyzing something as an object, as if you're analyzing something in terms of how it frames an issue, how it, if you're focusing on the biases that it might have, the viewpoints that it presents, the way it frames a topic, the sort of discourse it might have, if you're trying to figure out the author's point of view and the way it affects readers, you're probably using it as a primary source. If you're using a source to give you added interpretation and added analysis of the topic that you're already focusing on to help you support your own ideas and develop your own opinion of what to look for, then you're probably using it as a secondary source. So for Essay 2, I want you to do the following things for homework. I want you to review your own EBSCO academic articles that you found last week, and then based on I want you to analyze the primary sources that they are analyzing in their own sources, and then I want you to find your own sources that are similar to the ones that are being analyzed in your own academic source. and I want you to answer the following 3 questions here. And this handout can be found on our Canvas page. So first of all, the primary source that you locate, does it confirm or sort of add on or complicate the findings that you found in your EBSCOhost source? Does the primary source portray any problematic stereotypes that relate to the group or the culturally sensitive issue or topic you're focusing on? And does the primary source maybe expand or move away from those problematic stereotypes and give and acknowledge more complexities about the topic that you're focusing on? So for homework, I'd like you to submit these questions, these answers to these questions, in a double entry journal that you'll submit as a Microsoft Word document through Canvas before Monday, March 30th. So to show you how I'm doing it, I have my source here that I've read. So I've read this source, The Cultural Production of Mexican Identity in the United States, an examination of Mexican threat narrative, right? So I read it, and I noticed that they were focusing on the Los Angeles Times. I also noticed that they were focusing on the Los Angeles Times between 2008 and 2009. So I'm curious as a researcher and as someone writing my own essay for Essay 2, how is the Los Angeles Times representing Mexican immigrants today? Is it representing that topic in the same way that these authors report in terms of presenting this Mexican threat narrative, or have they improved? So what I did is I ended up going online and I searched Los Angeles Times, Mexican immigration threat to U.S. society, because those are some of the things that I noticed that my outside source from EBSCOhost was using to search for articles. And then I searched for some articles here, and I eventually came across 2 articles that gave me a sense of how the topic of Mexican immigrants is being discussed, how the discourse is shifting from the time that the authors of this source, that was my secondary source, are talking about. So my job now to do for homework is to read this article and see how this primary source, analyze it in terms of how is it framing the issue, the group that I'm focusing on, or the culturally sensitive issue that I'm focusing on. Is it confirming, adding on, or complicating the findings of my EBSCOhost source? Is it portraying any negative stereotypes that might towards the group or the culturally sensitive issue that I'm focused on for my essay? And then is it sharing anything that adds to the complexity and acknowledges the complexity of the issues and understanding of the topic at hand? So I want you to do something similar when it comes to finding your own primary source. All right, so that's going to be an end for this video. I look forward to seeing your primary sources. Make sure they relate to the academic source, to the same primary sources that are being analyzed in your academic source. So that means if your source is analyzing newspaper articles, you don't want to analyze a television show. That's not the same level of comparison. You want to also analyze another newspaper article to see whether it's confirming, complicating, adding on, or denying the research that you're already conducting in order to form a more thorough opinion of the topic. All right, I look forward to reading your essays. Thank you so much.